Right now, the February 2026 winter storm crisis is officially over. But the crisis in the United States is not. As of this morning, February 5th, 153 people across more than 20 states are confirmed dead. From the ice-covered highways of Texas to the frozen streets of New York City, this has become the deadliest winter storm to hit North America since Winter Storm Uri killed 290 people in 2021. 17 New Yorkers have died from hypothermia and exposure during an 11-day freeze. Three young brothers in Texas, ages 6, 8, and 9, drowned after falling through ice on a backyard pond while their mother watched helplessly from the shore. In Tennessee, Mississippi, and Kentucky combined, more than 60 people have lost their lives. Right now, nearly 300,000 customers are still without power. At the peak of the crisis, 800,000 homes and businesses sat dark and cold across the southern United States, some for nearly a week. In Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, over 1,000 customers lost electricity as melting snow and road salt seeped into Con Edison transformers. Utility workers have been laboring around the clock, but in some rural counties across Tennessee and Mississippi, full restoration is still days away. The storm system that meteorologists are now calling Winter Storm Fern stretched across a 2,000-mile front from northern Mexico to Maine, 230 million people, nearly 70% of the entire U.S. population, were under some form of winter weather alert at the height of the event. 24 state governors issued emergency declarations. Over 19,000 flights were canceled, and the economic damage, according to preliminary estimates from AccuWeather, could reach $115 billion, approaching the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. But here is the important part. Even as recovery crews work to restore the last pockets of power, meteorologists are tracking the next threat. A new winter storm system is now bearing down on 15 states across the Northeast and Midwest. New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, Indiana, West Virginia, Maryland, and Pennsylvania are all under fresh winter storm warnings. Up to 8 inches of snow and wind gusts reaching 50 miles per hour are expected to arrive within the next 48 hours. The crisis is not over. In the maps and satellite loops from mid-January, you can watch the system take shape. Around January 21st, a powerful low-pressure system formed over the open water of the Pacific, then crossed the Rocky Mountains and dropped into the Central Plains. The collision of two opposing forces created the monster. Warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico streamed northward, carrying unusual humidity and energy. At the same time, a massive Arctic air mass plunged south from Canada, bringing temperatures that in some locations dropped 40 degrees in just a few hours. The result was atmospheric bomb. Meteorologists measured rapid intensification, a process called bombogenesis, where the pressure inside the storm dropped so quickly that winds accelerated and precipitation intensified across an enormous geographic footprint. The system moved slowly, which meant it could dump snow and ice for days instead of hours. From January 23rd through January 27th, Winter Storm Fern crawled across the nation like a freight train moving in slow motion, burying the Midwest, paralyzing the South with ice, and then slamming the eastern seaboard with heavy wet snow and coastal flooding. By the time the storm reached its peak, over 10,000 flights had been canceled or postponed on a single day. Major airport hubs in Dallas, Atlanta, Charlotte, and Newark became gridlocked. Passengers slept on terminal floors. Airlines issued blanket travel waivers, allowing free rebooking, but with so many planes out of position and so many runways buried under snow, the backlog stretched for days. By the end of the week, the total flight cancellations topped 20,000. The snow totals were staggering. In Faust, North Carolina, a small community that rarely sees more than a dusting, 22.5 inches fell in a single storm, setting a local record and ranking among the heaviest snowfall totals ever recorded in that part of the state. Parts of Pennsylvania received more than 20 inches. The Bronx and New York City measured 13.5 inches, the highest total in the 5 boroughs. Central Park officially recorded 11.4 inches. Cornell University in Ithaca saw 14 inches blanket the campus. Across Oklahoma, Missouri, and Illinois, snow depths reached 14 inches, shutting down highways and stranding motorists. But it was the ice that caused the most devastating damage. Across the South, where infrastructure is not built for prolonged freezing, layers of ice up to 1 inch thick coated power lines, tree branches, and roadways. The weight snapped limbs and pulled down electrical equipment. In some counties, every single traffic light went dark. Trees that had stood for generations split apart under the load. And when ice finally began to melt, the runoff flooded streets and overwhelmed stormwater systems that were frozen solid. Then came the second punch. Just as communities were beginning to dig out from Winter Storm Fern, a second system, a rapidly intensifying bomb cyclone, formed off the East Coast between January 30th and February 2nd. This storm brought another round of heavy snow to North Carolina, Virginia, and the Mid-Atlantic, with some areas recording an additional foot of accumulation. Blizzard conditions and 55-mile-per-hour wind gusts battered coastal regions. The back-to-back nature of the storms stretched emergency response systems to the breaking point. By the time the storm finally weakened, at least 153 people had lost their lives. Causes of death ranged from hypothermia and carbon monoxide poisoning to traffic accidents on ice-slicked roads and drownings in frozen bodies of water. The storm killed more people than any other winter weather event in the United States in 5 years. And across the hardest-hit states, the question was no longer when the storm would end, but whether the systems designed to protect people, power, shelter, and food could hold together long enough for help to arrive. Walk into one of the emergency shelters still open tonight. Gym floors are lined with cots and folded blankets. Children play quietly with donated toys while their parents huddle around extension cords trying to charge phones so they can check on elderly relatives or find out when the power might return to their homes. Volunteers in red vests move through the rows handing out hot meals and bottles of water. The American Red Cross reports that it mobilized support for more than 125 warming centers and emergency shelters across the impacted states, deploying hundreds of trained volunteers and coordinating with local emergency management agencies. On the coldest nights, when wind chills drop below zero and staying outside for more than 10 minutes could cause frostbite, thousands of people who had nowhere else to go sought refuge in these shelters. In New York City, where 17 people have now died from cold-related causes, officials activated enhanced Code Blue protocols for 11 consecutive days, the longest stretch in recent memory. Preliminary findings from the New York City Medical Examiner show that 13 of those deaths were directly caused by hypothermia. 10 of the victims were found outdoors. Many were elderly or had disabilities. Many were homeless, caught in a system that, despite the warming centers and outreach teams, simply could not reach everyone in time. The storm also crippled the nation's blood supply. According to the American Red Cross, the extreme weather forced the cancellation of hundreds of blood donation events across more than 20 states. Thousands of units of blood were never collected, creating a critical shortage just as hospitals were treating accident victims, carbon monoxide poisoning cases, and patients with cold-related injuries. Hospital administrators have been rationing supplies, prioritizing trauma cases, and postponing elective surgeries that require transfusions. For millions of people, the storm did not just cut off electricity, it disrupted the invisible supply chains that keep modern life functioning. They are waiting for two things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. In New York, where the death toll now stands at 17, forecasters are warning residents that another storm system will arrive this weekend. The National Weather Service has issued winter storm warnings across the state, with predictions of up to 8 inches of new snow and wind gusts that could once again knock out power lines that crews just finished repairing. Governor Andrew Cuomo has extended the state of emergency and urged New Yorkers to stock up on supplies, charge devices, and avoid unnecessary travel. Here is the important part. Tennessee, a state that rarely sees prolonged ice storms of this magnitude, has extended its statewide emergency order to the end of the week. More than 80,000 customers in Tennessee and Mississippi were still without power as of January 27th. Many of them in rural areas where broken poles and down lines can take days to locate and repair. Emergency management officials have been coordinating with utility companies to pre-position repair crews and equipment, but the sheer scale of the damage has overwhelmed local resources. Mutual aid agreements have brought line workers from as far away as Florida and Texas, but the backlog remains enormous. In Kentucky, where 10 people have died, officials are preparing for the next round of winter weather by opening additional warming centers and distributing emergency supplies to vulnerable populations. In Mississippi, which also reported 10 fatalities, the governor has warned that prolonged cold could damage critical infrastructure, including water treatment plants and natural gas pipelines. In Texas, where 8 people died, including the 3 young brothers, state officials have been closely monitoring the electrical grid after Winter Storm Uri in 2021 pushed the system to the brink of total collapse. This time, thanks to billions of dollars in upgrades and additional generating capacity, the grid held. Though officials admit the system was tested harder than at any point since that catastrophic failure, across the airline industry, carriers have issued flexible rebooking policies and waived change fees, but the disruption has been profound. With over 19,000 flights canceled during the height of the storm and aircraft and crews scattered across the country in the wrong locations, it took nearly a week for schedules to return to normal. Passengers missed funerals, medical appointments, and job interviews. The economic ripple effect, from lost wages to missed business meetings, adds billions of dollars to the storm's total cost. They're waiting for two things that still have not fully returned: heat and certainty. And with another storm now approaching, the fear is that the recovery will be interrupted before it even truly begins. When you step back from the day-to-day updates and look at the bigger picture, a pattern emerges. The southern United States has an aging power grid that was never designed for prolonged ice storms. Trees planted decades ago now tower over power lines, and when ice accumulates, entire canopies collapse onto electrical infrastructure. In some counties, a single falling tree can cut power to thousands of homes because redundancy and backup circuits were never built into the system. The storm exposed that fragility in brutal clarity. Transportation networks also showed critical vulnerabilities. Interstate 40, a major east-west corridor that stretches from California to North Carolina, was shut down in multiple states due to ice and multi-vehicle accidents. Interstate 95, the East Coast primary north-south artery, experienced closures and massive delays from Virginia to Maine. When major highways close, supply chains grind to a halt. Grocery stores went out of fresh produce. Pharmacies cannot restock medications. Fuel trucks cannot deliver gasoline. A single storm can reveal how dependent modern society is on the assumption that roads will always be passable. Airport hub vulnerabilities also became painfully clear. Dallas, Atlanta, and Charlotte are critical connection points for the entire national aviation network. When those hubs close, even airports that are not experiencing weather delays are affected because planes and crews are out of position. The cascading effect can take a week to fully resolve, and passengers at the end of that chain, flying from cities with clear skies, still face cancellations and delays. There is also a deeper climate signal. A warmer atmosphere can hold more moisture. That means when cold air and storm systems do line up, the result can be heavier snow, more intense ice storms, and larger swings between unseasonable warmth and dangerous Arctic outbreaks. Scientists have been warning for years that climate change does not necessarily mean fewer winter storms. It can mean more extreme and unpredictable winter weather with rapid shifts that leave infrastructure and emergency systems scrambling to keep up. The nation's blood supply system, which relies on consistent donations and scheduled events, proved fragile when weather disrupted access for even a few days. Hospitals operate with limited reserves, and a single major storm can drop inventory below critical thresholds. The question now is not only how to rebuild, but how to make sure the next Winter Storm Fern does not push the same systems even closer to the breaking point. Infrastructure built for the climate of the past may not be sufficient for the climate of the future. Tonight, Winter Storm Fern is fading from the maps and the next winter system is still approaching. Meteorologists are tracking its path. Emergency managers are coordinating responses. Utility crews are preparing for another round of damage. But for millions of people, this winter will be remembered not by storm names, but by nights spent in cold houses, by long lines at shelters, and by the quiet fear of wondering what happens if the lights go out again. It will be remembered by neighbors who ran extension cords across yards so that someone else's refrigerator could stay cold, by volunteers who drove hours through dangerous conditions to staff warming centers, by line crews who worked through the night in sub-zero wind chills to restore power to strangers, by hospital staff who stretched dwindling blood supplies and postponed surgeries to care for the injured, by teachers who opened school buildings as shelters even when their own homes were without heat. 153 people did not survive this storm, but millions of others did, in large part because when systems failed, people stepped in. We will keep tracking both the science and the human stories as this historic winter continues to unfold. If you found this update useful, consider sharing it, subscribing, and letting us know how these storms are affecting you and your family. And as always, stay safe, stay informed, and stay prepared. How do you think your community should change after what this winter has revealed?